The order came down the hallway like a gunshot. Discharge him. Now. The monitors were still screaming. The man on the gurney was still bleeding, and the woman standing between the bed and the door was being told, in a voice sharp with authority, that keeping him alive would violate policy. The emergency department of St. Rowan Medical Center smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. Fluorescent lights flickered, tired and uneven. Rain hammered the windows hard enough to rattle the frames. It was just past 11 in the evening, the hour when mistakes get buried and voices get louder. A stretcher blocked the corridor. A grey-haired man lay on it, chest rising shallow, eyes unfocused. His wedding ring clinked faintly against the rail every time his hand trembled. Claire Monroe stood at his side, 40 years old, average height, scrubs too plain to notice. She held pressure on a soaked dressing with steady hands that did not shake. Her face was calm, almost unreadable, but her jaw was locked so tight it ached. She could hear the wet rattle in the man's lungs. She could hear the clock ticking above triage. She could hear the administrator behind her clearing his throat, impatient. "This isn't charity care," the man said, adjusting his tie. His shoes were spotless. Insurance flagged him as non-compliant. "We stabilize. We release. That's the law." Claire didn't look at him. She watched the monitor dip again. A nurse across the hall swallowed hard, eyes flicking between the screen and Claire's face. A resident hovered, useless, hands half raised like he wanted permission to breathe. "He won't make it to the parking lot," Claire said quietly. The administrator smiled thinly. "That's not your call." Around them, the department slowed, like animals sensing a storm. A gurney squeaked. A suction pump coughed. Someone laughed nervously at the desk, then stopped. Claire felt every eye on her back. She knew what they saw. A staff nurse overstepping. A problem. What they didn't see was the way she had already measured the room. The exits. The cameras. The silence stretching just before something irreversible breaks. The man on the stretcher gasped, a thin sound that barely cut through the hum of the lights. His oxygen saturation dropped again. 88, 86. The monitor answered with a shrill protest, and the resident flinched like he'd been struck. Claire felt it in her chest before anyone spoke. The edge was closer now. "Page respiratory," the resident said. Too late, already knowing it. "They won't come," the charge nurse murmured. Her eyes darted toward the glass office at the end of the hall, where silhouettes moved behind closed blinds. Decisions were being made without looking at the patient. The administrator stepped forward. "You're done here," he said, low and controlled. "Step away." Claire finally turned. Not fast, not slow. Her eyes met his, steady, flat. No pleading, no anger, just certainty. If I step away, he arrests in under 2 minutes. That's speculation. That's experience. A murmur rippled down the corridor. A young tech bit his lip. Someone whispered, "Jesus!" The man on the stretcher clawed weakly at the rail, nails scraping metal, a sound that crawled under the skin. His wife stood frozen near the vending machines, coat still on, purse clutched to her chest like armor. She hadn't cried yet. She was still hoping. "Ma'am," the administrator said, voice tightening. "You are not authorized to make this call. You are putting this hospital at risk." Claire glanced at the wife. One look, long enough to register the fear, short enough to be kind. Then she turned back to the bed. She adjusted the angle, lifted the man's chin, listening. The sound was wrong. Wet. Heavy. Not failure. Obstruction. "Get me suction," she said. No one moved. The resident shook his head. "We need approval." Claire's hand closed around the rail. Her knuckles whitened. "You need courage." The administrator's phone buzzed. He checked it, hesitated. That was new. Behind him, the blinds in the glass office opened a crack. A face appeared, watched, calculating. Claire leaned in close to the patient. Her voice dropped, calm, intimate. "Stay with me. Breathe when I tell you. Don't fight it." The man's eyes fluttered. He tried. Somewhere in the department, a printer whirred to life, spitting out discharge papers that no one touched. The clock kept ticking, and Claire knew with absolute clarity that whatever happened next would not be forgiven. Security arrived late and unsure. Two men with radios clipped too high on their belts, and eyes that avoided the patient. One of them cleared his throat. "We were told there's a compliance issue." The word hung there, bloodless and absurd. The man on the stretcher convulsed, a sharp jerk that pulled a wet sound from his chest. His wife cried out then, finally, a single raw noise that cut through the room. Claire didn't step back. She didn't argue. She reached for the suction herself and found the drawer locked. Of course it was locked. Supplies had been rationed quietly for months, access controlled by people who never touched a body. Her breath slowed. She felt the room narrow, like a tunnel. She could hear her own pulse. She could hear the administrator whispering into his phone, urgent now, defensive. The resident leaned close, voice breaking. "Claire, they're documenting this." She nodded once. Good. She tore the seal off a backup kit taped under the crash cart, fingers precise, movements economical. Someone behind her hissed, "You can't do that." She ignored it. The suction roared to life, harsh and necessary. The sound changed immediately. The patient's chest lifted, uneven but real. The monitor climbed. 90. 92. A fragile thread, but holding. The administrator stepped forward again, red-faced. "You just violated 3 protocols." Claire looked up at him. Really looked. She saw the fear now, thin and sharp behind his anger. "Then write them down carefully," she said, "because you're going to need every word." The glass office door opened. A woman stepped out, late 50s, tailored suit, eyes cold as river stone. The chief compliance officer. She took in the scene in one sweep. The patient, the wife on her knees, the suction line in Claire's hand, the chart untouched on the counter. "This ends now," the woman said. Claire met her gaze without blinking. "It doesn't," she replied. "Not if you want him alive when the ambulance comes." A pause, heavy, loaded, the kind that tips futures. Somewhere above them, Thunder rolled, and for the first time that night, the people in charge realized they were no longer in control. The ambulance siren cut through the rain like a blade, too late to be comforting, too early to promise relief. Red lights bled through the glass doors as the paramedics rushed in, boots squeaking on the floor, faces tightening when they saw the setup. One of them paused, eyes flicking to the suction line, then to Claire. "Who authorized this?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "No one," Claire said. "But he's breathing." The chief compliance officer stepped in front of the gurney, posture rigid, voice smooth. "This patient is being transferred immediately. Any further intervention will be handled off-site." She turned to the paramedics. "Document that this nurse acted independently." Claire felt the weight of the words settle. Independently. The most dangerous word in a system built on permission. She released the suction slowly, watching the numbers hold. Barely. The wife clutched Claire's sleeve as the gurney began to roll, her fingers shaking, her mouth opening and closing like she didn't trust her own voice. "Thank you," she whispered, breaking apart on the second syllable. Claire nodded once. She didn't trust herself to speak. As the doors slammed shut behind the ambulance, the department exhaled. Noise rushed back in. Phones rang, orders barked. Life pretending to be normal again. The administrator straightened his tie, relief flooding his face now that the risk was rolling away. "We'll handle this internally," he said, already turning. "Sit!" the compliance officer snapped, and he did. Claire peeled off her gloves. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. She felt hollowed out, scraped clean. The resident stood nearby, eyes wide, something like awe cutting through his fear. "They're going to suspend you," he said softly. "Probably," Claire replied. The compliance officer approached, lowering her voice. "You cost this hospital exposure." Claire met her gaze. "I bought him time." A beat. The woman studied her, really studied her now, as if seeing her for the first time. "Where did you train?" Claire looked past her, toward the rain-streaked doors, toward the dark street beyond. "Not somewhere you can audit," she said. Silence fell again. Different this time. Not panic. Recognition. And beneath it, the first tremor of a truth that would not stay buried much longer. By morning the rain had stopped, but the tension hadn't. It clung to the walls, to the coffee-stained desks, to the way people avoided Claire's eyes as she walked the corridor. An email waited in her inbox, flagged urgent, subject line sterile and final. Administrative leave pending review. Her badge access blinked red at the staff entrance. Twice. A quiet denial that felt louder than any siren. Inside the break room, the night crew sat in fragments. No one spoke. A paper cup trembled in a tech's hand. The resident from the night shift stared at the floor, like it might open and swallow him. When Claire entered, the room shifted. Shoulders tightened. Conversations died mid-breath. "You didn't have to do that," the charge nurse said finally. "Not unkind, just tired. You could have stepped back." Claire set her bag down slowly. "I know. You put all of us in a bad spot." Claire looked at her. "He's alive." That ended it. The charge nurse turned away. No one argued the outcome. They argued the cost. Security found her near the lockers. Different guards this time. More formal. One held a clipboard like a shield. "You need to come with us," he said, eyes flicking to the camera above the door. "Procedure over humanity, always." As they walked, Claire felt the familiar sensation rise in her chest. Not fear. Calculation. The building's rhythm. The way power moved here, quiet and sideways. She noticed the compliance officer watching from the mezzanine, face unreadable. She noticed the administrator pretending not to see her at all. In the small office off HR, the air was stale. The director slid a document across the desk without looking up. "You're suspended effective immediately. Investigation pending. You'll be contacted." "For saving a man's life," Claire said. The director sighed. "For acting outside your scope." Claire signed. The pen didn't shake. As she stood, her phone vibrated once in her pocket. A blocked number. She didn't answer. Not yet. She already knew this wasn't over. Systems like this didn't end stories. They exposed them. And somewhere beyond the walls of St. Rowan Medical Center, consequences were already moving, faster than anyone in that room understood. The call came just after sunrise, when the hospital was pretending the night hadn't happened. Claire stood in the parking structure, keys in hand, staring at the concrete wall like it might answer her back. The phone buzzed again. Same blocked number. She answered this time. "Ms. Monroe," a man said. Calm, controlled. "Not hospital. This is Special Agent Robert Hale with the Department of Justice. We need to talk." Claire closed her eyes for half a second. "Of course. About last night," she said. "About a pattern," Hale replied. "And about a patient you weren't supposed to touch." She leaned against her car, the metal cold through her jacket. "He lived." "He did," Hale said. "Long enough to give a statement." That got her attention. Inside the ICU across town, the man from the stretcher lay pale but conscious, tubes everywhere, eyes sharp despite the morphine haze. A federal marshal stood at the door. A recorder blinked red on the bedside table. The man swallowed, throat working hard. "She knew," he rasped, "before anyone else. She knew what was wrong." Hale nodded, making notes. "Did you recognize her?" The man's eyes shifted, unfocused for a moment, then locked back in. Not her face. Her voice. The way she moved. You don't forget that. Back at St. Rowan, the compliance officer sat alone in her office, replaying footage she wasn't supposed to have access to. Frame by frame, Claire's hands, the timing, the decision points. No hesitation, no panic. Not a nurse reacting. Someone executing. The administrator's phone rang. He didn't answer it. He already knew who it would be. Claire drove without turning on the radio. The city slid past, indifferent. She felt the old weight settle on her shoulders, familiar and unwelcome. She had buried that life carefully, changed paperwork, taken the quiet jobs, followed rules that made other people comfortable. The problem with systems built on silence is that they panic when the wrong person speaks. By the time Claire reached her apartment, 3 agencies were comparing notes. A sealed file was being reopened, and the question moving quietly through federal channels wasn't whether she had broken protocol. It was why someone like her had been hiding in plain sight. By noon, the hospital was surrounded by rumors that moved faster than facts. A nurse had gone rogue. A patient had been moved under federal escort. Administration had contained the situation. None of it touched the truth. Claire felt it in the way her neighbors watched from behind curtains as she returned home, in the way a black sedan idled too long at the corner before pulling away. She showered and let the water run until it went cold, standing still, eyes closed, counting breaths. The mirror showed a woman who looked ordinary enough to be forgotten. That had always been the point. She changed clothes, packed a small bag without thinking, fingers finding what they needed by memory. Phone charger, notebook, a folded document she'd sworn she'd never need again. The knock came at 2 in the afternoon. Precise, measured, not a neighbor. Claire opened the door to 2 people who did not introduce themselves right away. 1 man, 1 woman. Both wore the same calm. "We'd like to ask you some questions," the woman said. Claire stepped aside. "You're already late." They sat at her kitchen table, chairs scraping softly. The man placed a folder down, but did not open it. He studied Claire's hands instead. "You were trained to assess rooms," he said. "Threats, exits, time." "Yes." "You were trained to override," the woman added, "when the math demanded it." "Yes." They exchanged a glance, the kind that carries decisions. "St. Rowan has a history," the man said. "Patients moved too fast. Records adjusted. A compliance shield that looks legitimate until you map the outcomes." Claire felt something tighten behind her ribs. "You think I knew that?" "We think you sensed it," the woman said. And that scared them. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. The city kept moving. Claire leaned back, folding her arms. "So what happens now?" The man finally opened the folder. Inside were stills from security footage. Her movements. Time stamps. A pattern. "Now," he said, "the people who built that shield will try to bury you, and the people who benefit from it will come closer." Claire looked at the images, then up. Her voice was quiet. "Then stop pretending this is about questions." It was, and it wasn't. Somewhere downtown, a CEO was clearing his calendar, preparing to speak, and the silence Claire had relied on all her life was about to become a liability. The first threat arrived disguised as courtesy. An email, polite, carefully worded. An invitation to meet with executive leadership to clarify misunderstandings. Claire read it once, then deleted it. 10 minutes later, her phone rang from a private exchange. She didn't answer. Silence had taught her patterns, and this one was old. By late afternoon, the pressure shifted. Her bank app flagged an attempted access. Her building manager called to ask if she was expecting visitors. A neighbor mentioned 2 men asking questions about her parking spot. None of it was loud. That was the point. Power didn't kick doors. It leaned. Claire sat at her kitchen table and opened the notebook she'd packed earlier. The pages were blank, except for 1 line written years ago in careful block letters. "When they rush, they're hiding. She closed it and stood, moving through the apartment with a practiced calm. Blinds half drawn, lights off, shoes by the door. The city hummed outside, unaware. Across town, in a glass office with a view of the river, Thomas Kessler watched the same footage Claire had already seen. Chief Executive Officer, philanthropist, hospital network owner. His name never appeared on charts or discharge orders, but every decision bent toward him eventually. He paused the video on a frame where Claire leaned over the stretcher, eyes focused, world narrowed to one outcome. "She's a problem," someone said behind him. Kessler shook his head once. "She's a variable." Back in her apartment, Claire's phone vibrated. "Unknown number," she answered. "You should take the meeting," a man said. Smooth, familiar in a way that set her teeth on edge. "This doesn't have to escalate. It already has," Claire replied. A pause. Controlled irritation leaking through. "You're standing in front of a machine you don't understand." Claire looked at her reflection in the dark window. "Machines break," she said, and ended the call. Somewhere between the river and her street, decisions were made that would not be reversible. The quiet phase was over, and the people who had mistaken Claire Monroe for a manageable inconvenience were about to learn what happens when leverage meets resolve. The break came at dusk, not with sirens, but with absence. The sedan that had lingered for hours vanished. The calls stopped. The pressure pulled back just enough to invite a mistake. Claire didn't take it. She left her apartment through the stairwell, not the elevator, and merged into the crowd with a jacket that changed her silhouette and a cap pulled low. She moved like someone late for dinner, not like someone hunted. Downtown, a boardroom filled as the sun slid off the glass towers. Screens lit up. Charts appeared. A narrative assembled itself with the confidence of money. Thomas Kessler stood at the head of the table, hands flat, voice steady. "We're here to protect the institution," he said. "We acknowledge concerns. We will cooperate." Applause followed. It always did. 2 blocks away, in a borrowed office with peeling paint and a view of an alley, Special Agent Hale watched a different screen. The same institution. Different story. Timelines overlapped. Transfers that shaved minutes. Records adjusted to look compliant. Outcomes that tilted just enough to favor margins over breadth. Hale leaned back, eyes hard. "Cue it," he said. Claire slipped into the chair beside him without ceremony. She'd been there the whole time. She'd mapped the pattern while they argued about optics. Hale didn't look surprised. He slid a tablet toward her. "Tell me where it breaks." She scanned the data, fast, surgical. "Here," she said, tapping once. "And here. They rush discharges when the payer mix spikes. They hide behind transfers. They bet the patient won't live long enough to complain." "Why last night?" Hale asked. "Because he didn't fit the curve," Claire replied. "And because someone upstairs panicked." On the boardroom screen, Kessler's phone buzzed. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again. He frowned. The applause thinned. The doors at the back opened quietly. A woman entered, unannounced, and placed a folder on the table. "We're done with courtesy," she said. Kessler felt the room tilt. Across town, Claire exhaled slowly. Not relief. Focus. The machine hadn't broken yet, but the gears were grinding. The room went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with respect. Thomas Kessler felt it before he saw it, the subtle shift when power recalculates. The woman at the table did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. She slid photographs across polished wood. Transfer logs, timestamps, internal messages stripped of pleasantries. A map of intent. "We're not here for optics," she said. "We're here for outcomes." Kessler smiled, reflexive, trained. "We welcome oversight." "You invited influence," she replied. Oversight showed up. Phones lit the table like scattered stars. One executive stood, then sat. Another cleared his throat and failed to speak. On the screen, the live feed stuttered and froze on a frame Kessler knew too well. A nurse at a stretcher, eyes narrowed, hands sure. The image enlarged. The room watched itself watch her. Across town, Claire leaned forward as Hale muted the audio. She didn't need sound. She read posture, the tilt of shoulders, the moment when denial gives way to damage control. "He's going to offer a head," Hale said. "Not enough," Claire replied. Back in the boardroom, Kessler adjusted his cuff. "If mistakes were made, they weren't mistakes," the woman cut in. They were instructions. The door opened again. This time, no one announced it. A man stepped inside with a badge clipped where it could be seen without being shown. He placed a single document in front of Kessler and waited. The waiting did the work. Kessler's smile thinned. He scanned the page. His hand tightened, just a fraction. "This is premature," he said. "It's late," the man replied. In the alley-lit office, Hale pressed play. The room heard Kessler's voice break, just enough to be human. Claire stood. She felt the old calm settle, the kind that comes after a line is crossed and there's no need to pretend otherwise. Somewhere between money and consequence, the machine finally met resistance it couldn't price. And for the first time since St. Rowan learned to move patients like numbers, the ledger began to answer for the breathing it had taken for granted. Morning returned without ceremony. No sirens, no speeches, just the low grind of a city recalibrating after a quiet earthquake. St. Rowan Medical Center issued a statement before sunrise, words scrubbed clean of guilt, announcing leadership changes and a commitment to transparency. By noon, Thomas Kessler's name had vanished from the website. By evening, federal seals replaced the frosted glass offices where decisions had once been made without witnesses. Claire watched it all from a distance that felt earned. She sat on the steps outside her apartment, coffee cooling in her hands, traffic breathing past like a living thing. Her phone buzzed with messages she didn't open. Offers, apologies, invitations framed as reconciliation. Power trying to rewrite proximity as permission. She ignored them. She always had. Across town, the man from the stretcher sat upright in a rehab bed, color back in his face, wife asleep in a chair beside him. He didn't know her name would be redacted in most reports. He didn't need to. He was alive. That was the math that mattered. In a federal office, Claire signed one final page, ink dark and deliberate. Consultant, temporary, necessary. She handed the pen back without ceremony. The work ahead wasn't about revenge or victory. It was about friction, about making systems feel the weight of the bodies they moved too quickly, about refusing to let silence pass for order. That night, she walked past St. Rowan once, not to look back, but to mark the distance. The building stood unchanged, lights on, doors open, pretending nothing fundamental had shifted. It had. Institutions don't collapse when exposed. They adapt. So do the people who force them to. Claire Monroe disappeared again, the way she preferred. Not erased, repositioned. Somewhere between law and medicine, where outcomes can't be spun and time is measured in breadths, not margins. If this story stayed with you, show your support with a like, subscribe to follow what comes next, and comment these 3 words. Quiet strength lives.